Hello, this is Dr. Anna Maria Helt, herbalist and microbiologist here with basmati.com, and my almost ever-present sidekick in the background, Milo. And so our herb of the week this week is pine. I seem to be hitting on these herbs lately that I'm surprised I haven't talked about until now. Pine is one that gets pretty heavy usage for myself and in my little practice here. And so in terms of speaking about pine, I've always used the ones that grow near me interchangeably. So we have pinyon pine here in the Southern Rockies and Four Corners area. We have ponderosa pine, we have lodgepole pine, and other pines. And so one thing you might know about pine, even if you've never considered using it as medicine, is that it smells really good. It's an essential oil rich tree, and those essential oils are a big part of the medicine of pine. They're not all of the medicine of pine, but they are a big part of it. And one thing I want to mention on the oil is if you happen to buy pine essential oil, bottled oil, it's very rich in monoterpenes. You want to keep it in the refrigerator and don't use it for any topical applications once that bottle's been open for about a year, because the oil oxidizes fairly easily. And once it oxidizes, it can cause skin irritation and be a skin sensitizer and such. At that point, when it's an older pine oil, you can save it as, say, a bathroom deodorant or something to toss in your garbage disposal in the sink. If it's getting a little nasty smelling, you can still use the pine oil in that regard. And just a note, as I always say with essential oils, if you are using one topically, always dilute it in a carrier oil. Anyway, pine has a lot of traditional uses, from everything from the urinary system to the respiratory system. The needles were even traditionally used for heartburn, although I've never actually tried that particular use. The needles are what I use most for myself and in my practice, and here's a jar of needle extract going, although they're really delicious as a tea. Needles are the gentlest of pine medicine, and one of my favorites for support during colds and flus, respiratory infections in general. Pine is very strongly antiviral. It's also antibacterial, so we are getting at the root source of the infection to help the body faster clear it. But pine needles are also mildly expectorating, meaning that they can help us cough up some of the excess crud in our lungs. And they're decongesting pine needles in the sinuses too. And so you could even use pine essential oil for this, where you put some in a bowl of hot water and breathe in that steam to help with sinus congestion and any infection that may be going on in your sinuses. You could do the same thing with the needles. Instead of using 4 or so drops of pure pine essential oil in that hot water, you could actually chop up some pine needles really finely and use them in the hot water instead. Now, pine needles are also known for their vitamin C content, and in fact, they were used for scurvy, which is a disease that can be really severe that is due to vitamin D deficiency. Pine needles are also a mild diuretic. So there's a lot of not all diuretics, but a lot of diuretics work by slightly irritating the kidneys, which can trigger urination. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that's how pine's working, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Moving on along with pine is the bark, which is going to be stronger than the needles. And specifically, it's the inner bark. So here's the outside of the tree. It's the stuff on the inside, not the crusty stuff on the outside. So the inner bark is stronger. It can be used as a tea as well. A way to make it more palatable, though, would be to actually decoct it or boil it. And you can look at how to make teas via decoction by looking me up on basmati.com. And you'll find information there on how to do that. And then after you're done decocting it, you strain it out and you stir in some honey and make a syrup out of it, and that will taste a lot better than just the tea itself, the decoction itself. So this is going to be even stronger medicine, for instance, for respiratory infection. It's going to be a stronger expectorant for coughing up lungers, especially good after the acute phase of a respiratory infection. And keep in mind, the bark and the needles are going to have that pine essential oil in it. And actually, if you've never done this, the next time you're around a pine tree, go up and stick your nose in the bark. It smells heavenly, especially where I live in Durango. The pondies we have around here and the other pines, the pinon, you go up to where there's a crack in the bark and there's resin coming out, and it smells absolutely amazing, especially the pondies. They smell like butterscotch or vanilla. And so there's some interesting stuff going on with the aromatics in pine between the needles and the bark that maybe I'll save for a pine aromatherapy video. Anyway, the resin, or that pitch, the sticky stuff that you see exuded on the bark or sometimes in chunks under a pine tree, is the strongest medicine when it comes to cold and flu. It's a very strong expectorant. And in fact, the late great herbalist Michael Moore talks about in his book taking just a little piece of that pitch or resin and chewing it to cough up lungers. Also, Michael Moore talks about a traditional use of pine resin for splinters, where you've got something stuck in your skin. You melt that resin and you put it on that splinter, and it's going to hurt putting that hot resin on, and then it cools and hardens the resin, and then you rip it off, which is also going to hurt, but it might actually help get the splinter out. And it's antiseptic, so it can help prevent some infection going on there. Pine pitch has also been used for urinary tract infections, but pine can be a bit harsh on the kidneys, and so you do want to be careful. If you do have any kidney stuff or a history of kidney disease, then you don't want to be using pine pitch for your UTI, or you don't really want to be using pine in general. In that case, I would say even skip the needles if you have kidney stuff, and that's just me being really conservative and going with my gut there. And so another thing about pine pitch is it is very drawing. So not just for splinters, but other sorts of things, bug bites and stuff. It can help draw out whatever nastiness is there under your skin. One of my favorite uses, though, for pine pitch before I sign off is as incense, saving that resin and using it for scented products. It smells absolutely incredible. And what I'll do is I'll let it kind of dry out a little bit at home and crush it up, and then mix it with other plant aromatics. And you can put those on charcoal burners and such. And it smells really good. It's antiseptic in the air. And it's really fun to play with pitches or resins from different species of pine, because while they'll all be characteristically pine in their scent, they're going to have different nuances. And so, for instance, pinyon, where I am, the resin is just divine, and it has sweet notes to it along with that standard pine scent that we know of. It's amazing, kind of a powdery sweet scent. Ponderosa is very strongly piney, and it has kind of a balsamic scent to it, not quite as sweet as pinyon, but it also smells delicious. So the different pines are going to have different scents. And in fact, pinyon pine, since I'm mentioning it, is a very popular one to use for salves around here. So that resin is used for salves, drawing salves, infections, bug bites, things like that, small wounds. And then one last thing to mention is pine nuts. And so the nuts from pinyon pine are very popular in the Southwest and extremely nutritious. Just make sure if you are harvesting them to leave some for the animals. And with that, that is pine. And until next time, take care.